What's up guys, Nathan Hamilton here. Today we're going to be talking about what FPS, frames per second, you should be using to shoot better iPhone videos. Welcome to my channel everyone, and this video today is another segment in the series of how to shoot better iPhone videos. What I want to do is take your videos from, right down here, what you take with the app, to way up here. As we see it, this thing is extremely powerful, and this is an iPhone 6. I'm shooting this on a 7 Plus, and in the advancements of technology have made these extremely powerful cameras. And the question is, how many frames per second makes sense for your footage? And we'll show you in different scenarios where maybe shooting at 240 frames per second, maybe shooting at 24 frames per second makes sense. But before we get into it, it's important to understand first off essentially a 101 on what FPS is. 24 frames per second is pretty straightforward. It's going to take 24 still shots and stitch those together to make a seamless video. But why that makes sense is 24 frames per second as cinematic footage. So when you're looking at the big screen, watching a movie, that's what our eyes are used to seeing. The various motion blur, the movements on the camera and so forth. That's what you see when you look at a film and say, okay, that's professionally shot. Now on the other end of the spectrum, you can run at 60 frames per second. You go to 120, as I mentioned, 240. Now you can't do this on the native camera app on your iPhone 7, 6, and so forth. But there is Filmic Pro, which I use to shoot all of my videos, and it's extremely powerful. It takes what the camera can do and essentially unlocks it and turns it into a DSLR, where you can control ISO, you can control shutter speed, you can control frame rates, you can control image stabilizations, white balance. All of this in different FPS can be useful for different scenarios. Cinematic footage is going to shoot with a slower FPS, whereas if you're shooting B-roll and you want to slow it down, you do need to shoot at a higher frame rate to make that buttery smooth B-roll so it flows along really nicely. In those instances, 120 to 140 FPS does make sense. So to highlight this, what I've done is shot some footage in different FPSs going from 24 to 60 to 120 and 240 to show you guys if there is a little bit difference, if you can recognize a difference between the two, so you can make a choice for yourself and say, okay, this is the setting that I want to have for this specific video, this is the setting I want to have for another video, and let's go ahead and take a look. if you're looking closely, for my eye, even on a laptop or on a larger screen, I didn't see a whole heck of a lot of difference. Now, a caveat to why that is, and this is going to be the lesson learned for the day, which hopefully can be useful for you in the future as well. There are some features with an iPhone that you just don't get with a DSLR, and this highlights it perfectly because while I was able to shoot at 24 FPS, your shutter should be double that rate. But it's not possible. This footage was shot when it's very bright out, so I was unable to get the exposure that I wanted and essentially had to adjust the shutter speed. So you're not getting true cinematic footage. And if you go back and rewind and compare the 24 to say the 60 and the 120 and 240 now, if you pay close attention, sure, there are some little differences. You can see the motion blur coming across is a little bit different. One of the limitations of the iPhone camera is we're not able to control for those very bright light scenarios and to really get the best footage. Now, the way that professionals do it, to put what's called an ND filter over the lens. And an ND filter essentially moderates the amount of light that can reach the camera sensor, almost like sunglasses for your camera. And in that case, what happens when there's very bright light out, you can put an ND filter on and you can get, say, 24 frames per second, and you can double your shutter speed to 48 and then adjust ISO so that you do have a cinematic shot. And I don't have an ND filter at this point, but it is something that I do want to purchase in the future. And I think it'll take my footage far beyond what we're able to see here and will truly get that cinematic feel for it. Beyond the ND filter, it's also important to think about what I mentioned earlier in the video is how you shoot B-roll, because at 60 frames per second is even on the lower end. I would suggest, as you can see when slowing down the footage, is going to 120, 240 will even get even better B-roll. It'll be super smooth when you slow it down. You'll still get detail. So the takeaways, lessons for the day are, in bright light scenarios, there's not going to be much you can do without having an ND filter for your phone. So that is a limitation of your iPhone camera. And the second takeaway is what frame rate to shoot for B-roll. And in these instances, I would suggest at least 120 frames per second. Now you're gonna have a big file. It's going to chew up a lot of memory on your phone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and comment below and let me know which footage you think was best out of those comparisons. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. As if you are a subscriber to this channel, I would love to teach you some more tips in the future, all with the goal of teaching you how to shoot better iPhone videos. We'll see you in the next one.